Hello, and welcome to this webinar on how being a better communicator makes you a better scientist. My name is Anne Moser. I am the science communicator in residence here at the University of Calgary in the Faculty of Science. And over the next 20 or 30 minutes or so, I am hoping that we can romp through this topic and land on two really key switches that we hope can be flipped that will help you become a better communicator. And insider tip, they are almost the exact opposite of the way you would communicate to fellow scientists. I have been working in the training of science communications for decades, and I'm happy to say that the culture is changing. I am less happy to say it is changing at a very slow pace. So there are some things that we want to accelerate, and part of this kind of a webinar and part of this science communication residency is helping to move the culture towards understanding that being a better communicator makes you a better scientist, but it is not the same as being a scientist. There is a lot of evidence, empirical evidence, that shows what effective communications looks like. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's jump into a little game to start. It's a memory game. Take a look at this slide for 3 seconds. I'm going to ask you a question now. What direction was the spoon facing? Okay, let's play this again. I'm going to show you another slide, and then I'm going to ask you another question. Name 2 fruits on the tray. A different question. And what direction was the spoon facing? Chances are you were able to identify both the fruits and the direction of the spoon in the second slide. This is just for fun, but it is just to point out empirically that the brain has limited capacity to remember things. And you know this. It's a truism almost. You know, there's Far Side cartoons like this, and I'm sure you see it in the classroom. My brain is full. Your brains can become full. They physically can become saturated, and I don't mean physiologically, but you can get to a point where you can't take in any more information. And this is a challenge for scientists because we pride ourselves on detail and accuracy. And in fact, that volume of information is just a huge characteristic of science right now. And with fellow colleagues, it's important, but it is not important. And in fact, it creates chaos with efforts to communicate science. So what we need to do as a team is encourage each other to simplify and make decisions about what to leave out. Because communicating well is now growing to be an essential skill as a scientist. There are obvious reasons, you know, it makes you a better teacher. It helps get financial support for your research. If you're a good grant writer, if you can distill what it is that you're trying to do in simple terms. It can help you help get others involved in your research if you can get them excited about what you're doing. It helps on your team. It helps resolve conflict. It helps you with every manner of collaborating. It helps you be more diverse in who is attracted to your teams or to your research projects. You know, it helps you work well with others, you know, in every way. Being a better communicator makes you a better scientist. Okay, so we know why, but how? So I'm going to boil it down to a single how. Think of a time when it felt like there was a poor connection with your audience. The single how is that you need to be able to try and put yourself in your audience's shoes. This is easier said than done, as you can imagine. But job number one is to connect before all else. And you're saying, well, connect even before the science? You know, why am I talking to them at all if it's not about the science? And that's the point. Why are you talking to them? You need to understand why your science might matter to someone else. So this is a question that you should be asking yourself over and over again. Why might my science matter to you? That is the first step in communicating well. And it's different, you know, for government funders, they're looking for what's relevant to their mandate. For industry partners, they're looking for whether your science is going to help them solve a problem they have. Other scientists, they're looking at your work, how it compares to theirs, or whether they want to collaborate. NGOs, they have specific goals. The media is in the storytelling business. They need to get eyeballs on their content. They're looking for things that are fresh and new. And the public, a lot of the public cares about science, informed or not, that they may be, but they are interested in science. So understanding why your science might matter to these different groups is the very first point in figuring out what to cut out. Connection before content, in a nutshell. The second big thing to consider is volume. I'll let you read this joke. Okay, it is dated, and he may not be our prime minister for very long, but this was right after that period where Harper was muzzling scientists, and this is from The Onion. It is a humorous piece, but it works because it's based on a truism, and that is that scientists will go on and on about their area without really checking in to see whether or not anyone is listening. So I want to, because I know as scientists you are empirically motivated, I want to use an example from Carl Wyman's research. Carl Wyman, if you're not familiar with him, he was a Nobel Prize winning physicist who ended up taking a 10-year term at UBC, I think it was 10 years, to focus on science education. And being a scientist, he was very empirical about this. What this graph is showing you is that what Carl Wyman realized, the traditional method of trying to impart to students all of your brilliant knowledge in a passionate way, regardless of how skilled you are as an orator, is a lot less effective at having the students learn the material than having them engaged in learning with peers, you know, the peer-to-peer model approach. You may be familiar with this from science education, but I share it here because it makes this point that if you look at the data of what works when sharing science with different audiences, then our traditional approaches, you can see, don't work. And by traditional approach, I mean oratory approaches. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment just to pause on that, because it's so critical to think about what works in communicating with non-scientists versus scientists. And it's not detail. It's really connection. You know, John Rennie, who is a good friend and was editor-in-chief at Scientific American for 15 years, used to say, what really matters in communicating science, and he was thinking specifically about writing in this case, is the first sentence. And then what really matters in communicating science is the second sentence. And then what really matters is the third sentence. And da-da-da. You get the point. You can lose readers or your audience at any second. There is a competitive world out there. They've got other things they could flip to or change the channel. So the job as a communicator is to make sure the audience is with you, constantly checking in. So Are you still with me? Okay, let's go back to the slides. If only it were this simple. Realizing and knowing what to take out is the second biggest challenge in communicating science. And this is not about dumbing down. And I really wish that term dumbing down was never invented, because it's disrespectful. It suggests that the people who you're trying to communicate with are somehow dumb. Most people that you're talking to do have the brain power to understand what you're talking about, but they don't have the experience and they don't have the jargon or the language. This deficit model is part of what's gotten us into trouble in the first place. The idea that people just don't understand science well enough. They aren't taking the time to understand important, really basic science concepts. You know, that if they knew what I knew, they'd think what I think. And this deficit model has really wreaked havoc with the way we've been trying to communicate science, because it has led people to try and say more, say it over, say it louder, and that, the evidence suggests, is not the best approach. You know, you can't just say the numbers speak for themselves, or numbers don't lie. But as you can see through the mainstream media, that people are interpreting the very same numbers in different ways. So people are bringing mental models to your science, whether you like it or not. And they're bringing mental models to your science that may or may not be aligned with your picture of the universe. So to develop expertise in communicating science, you need to understand where they're coming from, to connect first. And to connect, it does mean simplifying, not dumbing, but simplifying what you're going to try and get across, because otherwise you'll just douse them or deluge them in information, and it won't make any sense. You know, as a culture, scientists are so concerned with getting it right that there's just too much detail. And this has been a very slow rock to move. Scientists are very hard on each other when they see each other saying things that aren't fully explained. And to a mainstream audience, that's a gift. So I would ask fellow scientists to back off a little and let your colleagues make decisions about what to leave out. And when they're doing that, they're actually being masterful communicators and doing a better job of communicating. It doesn't mean they're doing a worse job of science. It means they know what they're doing when they're communicating science. And that means leaving out some detail. You're applying a different measure. As I mentioned before, you're applying connectivity and relationship before content. As a culture, scientists are so concerned with getting it right that there's just too much detail. And this has been a very slow rock to move. Scientists are very hard on each other when they see each other saying things that aren't fully explained. And to a mainstream audience, that's a gift. So I would ask fellow scientists to back off a little and let your colleagues make decisions about what to leave out. And when they're doing that, they're actually being masterful communicators and doing a better job of communicating. It doesn't mean they're doing a worse job of science. It means they know what they're doing when they're communicating science. And that means leaving out some detail. You're applying a different measure. As I mentioned before, you're applying connectivity and relationship before content. So, you know, that in a nutshell are the two things. I want to leave you with one final thing, and that is that you are interesting as a scientist, as a person, as a personality, as a three-dimensional person with values, passions, interests. You are interesting. We're taught as scientists to leave ourselves out of it and to really, to discipline ourselves out of it. But when it comes to communicating science, bringing yourself into it is more important than ever. I want to encourage you to be a character. All good storytelling involves characters. You know, not an outlandish character, yourself, but a real person, and not someone playing a role that has access to a lot of facts, but a real person. So let me play you a clip from Jay Ingram, who you may know.
I kind of used to laugh a little bit when people would say, oh, Daily Planet's a great science show. Because the truth of the matter is, Daily Planet wasn't really a science show. It was, like every other TV show that's ever been successful, a show about people. Now, the people that we had on the show had some connection, sometimes tenuous, to science and technology. That's why we invited them on the show. They were the most successful when, instead of coming across as scientists, as being technical and knowledgeable, they came across as passionate, emotional people who understood the audience. That's why Daily Planet was successful, not as a science show, but as a people show.
Thank you. So there, in a nutshell, is what we're hoping you will be able to do. Make room for change. Connection before content. Ask yourself, why does your science matter to someone else? And remember, you yourself are interesting. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you will be able to practice connecting, practice simplifying, and practice being the fullest version of yourself as you communicate your science. Thank you so much.